The infection by the narcissist. Vaccine. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I've explained to you how people's thoughts, minds, beliefs can become infected by the views of one or more narcissists. I explain how this occurs as a consequence of the narcissism creating a true believer who then occupies the first tier in the belief system and then infects second-tier inhabitants who are individuals who are susceptible to what is being said by that particular narcissist, and then third-tier individuals are infected as a consequence of their reliance or investment in something that is pertinent to the message that the first-tier narcissist is disseminating. And that's how the ideas, beliefs, propaganda, if you will, of the narcissist becomes established in the minds of many people. I've explained this because often people think to themselves, I get it that someone has that belief, but why is it that people take up those beliefs? Why do they invest in what that narcissist is saying? Why do they accept it? And that video went into detail as about why that happens. Well, I'm going to provide you with a further example of how this has happened with a real-life example utilizing Robert F. Kennedy. It relates to the issue of thimerosal. Again, Robert F. Kennedy became identified with the thimerosal issue through a particular route, but it was also in response to advocacy from those sitting within the third tier who had a vested interest in relation to vaccines, but they were part of the anti-vaccine movement. A scion of America's most celebrated political family, traumatized as a child by the assassination of his father and his uncle, Kennedy struggled with heroin addiction and compulsive womanizing, leading to youthful criminal convictions and the suicide of his estranged wife. These difficulties were widely publicized because of his family background, but the public and the criminal justice system were sympathetic and gave him a series of second chances. Accordingly, as a consequence of his narcissistic behavior, he was able to gain the sympathy, because of this background, from the public. Court-mandated public service led to a career as an environmental lawyer and activist. He used his training as a lawyer to found an environmental litigation clinic at Pace University, which filed successful suits against companies polluting New York rivers, including one that forced ExxonMobil to clean up millions of gallons of spilled oil on Newton Creek in Brooklyn. Kennedy reports that he was recruited into anti-vaccine activism by parents of autistic children. I was drawn into the controversy only reluctantly. As an attorney and environmentalist who has spent years working on issues of mercury toxicity, I frequently met mothers of autistic children who were absolutely convinced that their kids had been injured by vaccines. Privately, I was skeptical. Kennedy had no training in research, design, or statistical data analysis, skills that are essential in evaluating epidemiological research. Instead of addressing the research directly, he focused on the motivations and behavior of the scientists. In 2005, he wrote an article for Rolling Stone and Salon in which he was outraged that scientists and public health officials have professional meetings that are not open to the public or the press. The article that he wrote actually has several factual errors, such as claiming that the amount of thimerosal children received was 187 times the accepted limit, when it was actually 187 micrograms, which is 40% over the limit, which led the magazines to issue corrections, and Salon withdrew it from its website in 2011. Kennedy, however, republished it on his own website, claiming the errors were minor. Despite his charisma, Kennedy has not been successful in convincing his mainstream political allies to join his crusade against thimerosal. Prominent political allies have urged him to drop the issue, telling him that it is a lost cause. But he insists that the only way I can stop this is if someone shows me I'm wrong on the science. He insists that his opponents prove to him that he is wrong. Not that he must prove that he is right, but that he assumes that he's right, and it's for everybody else to prove that he is wrong. He insists that his opponents prove that he's wrong, despite his lack of quantitative skills needed to evaluate the epidemiological research. He says he finds the Centre for Disease Control's refusal to agree with his recommendations baffling, but fails to cite or respond to the arguments in any of the reports by respected scientific organisations that carefully explain the reasoning. Thus, he advances a view, then says you have to prove me wrong, but when people show the science, he does not accept it, showing that rigid thought of the narcissist. He then, of course, shifts the blame onto them for the problems by explaining that the CDC is a cesspool of corruption, engaged in scandalous conflicts with the $25 billion vaccine industry, and accuses it of publishing fraudulent studies. His book, Thimerosal, Let the Science Speak, is a curious example of the use of strange logic while avoiding explicit accusations of secret wrongdoing that might lead to lawsuits. Kennedy compiled the book and is listed as the editor. He claims to have assembled a crack team of respected scientific researchers to review the voluminous peer-reviewed literature related to thimerosal and human health. This at first sounds somewhat promising, until you notice that all the substantive articles in the book are anonymous. The names of the respected scientific researchers do not appear anywhere in the volume. This is not the norm for scientific publications. Scientists are expected to take credit and responsibility for their published work and are normally eager to do so. The book was a result of a lengthy process whereby the more explicit claims were removed. This was described by Dan Burns, who wrote, Kennedy has, in his own word, assembled not one but two books. A closely held manuscript that exposes the conflicts of interest at the heart of the vaccine autism cover-up, and published book, this one, in which key revelations from the year-old draft, the so-called combustible chapters, have been dismembered, replaced, eviscerated, or buried. Despite its flaws, Kennedy's book has been cited enthusiastically by third-tier autism conspiracy believers on the Age of Autism website. A reader review posted to the Amazon.com website stated that Kennedy offers proof of a government conspiracy to shut down this debate. David Belzer and David Wayne cite Kennedy several times in their book on corporate conspiracies, arguing that he establishes a clear case of thimerosal being the toxin that is responsible for a health epidemic. Kennedy, in return, praises corporate conspiracies as a sobering chronicle of the world's model democracy's tragic devolution to corporate kleptocracy. Accordingly, despite not actually embracing any scientific argument or explanation, this particular narcissist sits in the first tier, issues a book, which is then picked up on by people in the third tier, those who have a vested interest because they have autistic children and are looking for help and assistance, who are readily susceptible to what he has to say because it is a matter that is close to their hearts. But notwithstanding the fact that there are considerable flaws in what he's stating, he maintains these views and beliefs, despite initially suggesting that he was sceptical about it. He maintains these views and beliefs and has caused other individuals to become infected by what he has stated because of their desire to find an answer that matches what their circumstances happen to be. Another instance of how the narcissist infects the minds of other people, this time with regard to the issue of vaccination. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.